Today is June 23rd, 2024. As the conflict in Ukraine continues, we continuously hear this narrative across the collective West of how the misfortune of Ukraine on the battlefield is temporary. It's owed to this delay in U.S. funding. Now that U.S. arms and ammunition are on their way, this is going to help turn the tide in Ukraine's favor once and for all. And it's omitting the fact that even before the funding delay, Ukraine was losing territory, was facing critical shortages of manpower, equipment, and ammunition, and that this resurgence of U.S. arms and ammunition is not on a scale nearly large enough to change anything for Ukraine in its favor. What we are seeing on the battlefield is instead the predictable outcome of the 2023 offensive. I had said months before Ukraine began its offensive in June last year that no matter how much territory they managed to take on the battlefield, it would come at the expense of huge numbers of their manpower, equipment, and ammunition being wiped out. And it would take them a year or more to try to reconstitute their forces, if that was even possible. It is impossible to look at what's going on and not see that this is what's happening. No matter how much territory Ukraine gets, they are losing men and equipment they cannot replace. They have no way of replacing it. And just a matter of physics, they are overextending their army physically. It is being overextended, it is being stretched out, and it's being thinned out in the process. When it reaches the maximum extent that it can push, and it has suffered all of the losses they will in the process of doing so, Russian forces are still going to be there in this basically the same number and with the same amount of equipment as before, along with 300,000 additional troops and associated equipment. This is clear as day. I regularly cited this article from the Washington Post from September 2022, talking about the nature of Ukraine's supposedly successful offensive in 2022 in Kherson and Kharkov. And if you read through this Washington Post article, they're citing Ukrainian soldiers and officers explaining how lopsided the fighting was in Russia's favor, how severe their losses were, despite ultimately being able to retake Kherson city. Russian forces admittedly went east of the Dnieper River with most of their equipment and manpower intact. It was unlike Ukrainian defeats, say in Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Mariupol, where Ukraine suffers catastrophic losses and Russian forces take these cities because there is nothing left of Ukraine's forces to fight. What little remains is eventually withdrawn long after any chance of actually preserving manpower and equipment to fight another day. And this is a pattern that has repeated itself over and over again. It repeated itself in spectacular fashion in 2023. The consequences of Ukraine's failed offensive, the severe losses they suffered, continue to reverberate to this day. That is what we're seeing on the battlefield. This is not the result of a funding delay in the United States. Now, this article that I want to go over in detail was brought to my attention by Scott of Calibrated. I regularly include links to his Telegram channel in the video description below, along with that of Alex and Alexander of the Duran and also Mark Sloboda. They all do daily updates on what is going on in Ukraine. The Duran does in-depth videos every single day regarding the situation on the ground in Ukraine. So if you're looking for daily updates, that's who to follow. It'll be in the video description below. This article that I'm referring to is from Associated Press, and it's titled, "Ukraine employs a flexible defense while waiting for new Western ammo to get to the front." And what this is in reality is, when they say flexible defense, it means they're falling back. And they're claiming they're falling back to buy time until additional weapons and ammunition arrive, which will never arrive in quantities necessary to reverse what is happening. And so what it is actually is Ukraine is losing. They're losing territory and they're falling back. This is what the article says. Ukrainian firepower has been improving since U.S. lawmakers approved a much-needed military package this spring, though not quickly enough to halt the Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine. So what metric are they citing that allows them to draw the conclusion that their firepower is improving? Where are they getting that from? It says, although the influx of Western munitions has shrunk Kiev's glaring artillery disadvantage, Moscow's forces are still gaining ground along the snaking front line and will likely continue to do so through the summer, when the drier ground and longer days will only aid their push. So it seems like every metric that we can observe suggests that the additional ammunition and equipment is not making much of a difference. It continues, it says, Ukraine is still on the defensive in the Donetsk region, enabling Moscow's forces to inflict heavy losses during Ukrainian troop rotations and bringing them closer to crucial Ukrainian supply routes. Kiev has turned to a bend but don't break strategy to buy time until it can get more Western weapons and ammunition to the front. But these weapons and this ammunition does not exist in the quantities necessary to reverse this situation. This was the case before the funding delay in US Congress. This was already happening. The funding delay obviously didn't help, but it is not something that created this problem in the first place. It was already well underway. Remember that even during the 2023 Ukrainian offensive, which was soundly defeated by Russian forces, not only did they not take back huge amounts of territory, throughout 2023, they actually suffered a net loss of territory to Russia. Remember that. So this is what AP goes on to say. New weapons and ammunition have been trickling to the front line since US President Joe Biden signed off on the massive aid package in April. But it will take weeks, if not months, for Ukraine to fully replenish its depleted stocks. The problem is, this equipment and ammunition is not coming in fast enough, in large enough quantities, and it never will, because they simply don't produce enough to build a critical mass of fighting capacity. So by the time all of this aid reaches the front line, whatever is reaching it right now will already have long since been exhausted. It continues, it says, it takes time to load ships that must then cross the Atlantic, Ukraine's first deputy minister of defense told the Associated Press. But we're already seeing the results. Russia's artillery advantage was 7-1 at the start of the year, but it is down to 5-1 now. Whether it's 7-1, 5-1, or just 2-1, that means that Ukraine is outgunned, significantly outgunned by Russian forces, and they will continue to lose territory to forces that clearly outgun them. I've gone over exhaustively Western media headlines admitting Russia makes many times more ammunition than the collective West. Western plans to expand production between now and say 2025 or even 2027 will still fall short of what Russia is producing right now. This is not going to change anytime soon. We're just talking about the degree to which Ukraine is outgunned and the pace at which they will be falling back on the battlefield, and the pace at which their forces are being depleted. Their manpower, their equipment, and their ammunition is being depleted. It's being depleted faster than it can be replaced regardless. And I just want to drive home this point of just how bad the shortage is in terms of Western military aid to Ukraine. This was from Financial Times. U.S. to redirect Patriot air defense orders to Ukraine. Interceptor missiles destined for other countries will be diverted to help Kiev protect cities and critical infrastructure. This is a move made out of desperation, and I've heard from different sources that all Patriot missile exports are now going to go straight to Ukraine. I've heard others say that it's just some countries whose orders are going to be delayed and sent to Ukraine instead. Financial Times really doesn't make that clear. It says the U.S. is pausing the delivery of Patriot interceptor missiles to other nations so it can fast-track orders for Ukraine to bolster its air defenses against Russian attacks. The U.S. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby confirmed that the U.S. had made the difficult but necessary decision to prioritize delivering Patriot and NASAM missiles to Ukraine, delaying deliveries to other countries that had purchased them so that Kiev can maintain its stockpiles at a key moment in the war. When you do this because your stockpiles have been exhausted. The United States has Patriot missiles on hand, but it has no more that it is able to spare without compromising contingency plans for all the other conflicts it's trying to provoke all around the world. It also means that your production of Patriot missile interceptors is not large enough to cover both the needs of yourself and your allies and this proxy war you're waging in Ukraine. Now you're making difficult decisions about who is going to get these missiles and who is not, because you simply don't make enough to give them to both. And I have talked about annual Patriot missile interceptor production rates. And let's go to this article right here. Defense News, how Patriot proved itself in Ukraine and secured a fresh future. And it says right here, April 2024, in 2018, Lockheed's annual rate of building these missiles was 350 a year. The company planned to increase that to 500 annually. But Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 has put new pressure on this effort, and the U.S. Army has provided funding to get Lockheed to 550 missiles per year. In December, the firm said it had reached a rate of 500 per year. The company built an 85,000 square foot facility equipped with automated systems to build PAC-3 missiles, and is now preparing to produce 650 a year by 2027. Let's just pretend that the United States is producing 650 missiles right now. Not by 2027, but right now. How many missiles does Russia fire at targets across Ukraine during that same period of time? 1 year. Let's look at this Reuters article. Ukraine says Russia has launched over 8,000 missiles, 4,630 drones during war. This was February 2024. So over the course of 2 years of fighting, 8,000 missiles, over 4,000 missiles a year. And the West admits that Russian missile production continues to increase. We remember at the beginning of the conflict, the collective West continuously said Russia was going to run out of missiles this month, next month, in 6 months. It never happened. The number of missile attacks continued to actually increase because Russian missile production continued to increase. They produce a huge number of missiles every year, 4,000 missiles a year. So the US, if it sent every single Patriot missile it manufactured at a rate of 650 a year to Ukraine, would still be far short of intercepting all of these missiles Russia is firing at targets across Ukraine. Standard operating procedure for air defenses requires at least 2 missiles fired to try to intercept an incoming target. This increases the probability of a successful intercept. Let's just say, again, overly optimistic numbers, let's just say the US is making 650 missiles a year and every single missile goes to Ukraine. And let's just pretend that every single missile has a 100% intercept rate. That still means the Patriot missile system would only be capable of shooting down 16% of these Russian missiles being fired at targets across Ukraine, with 84% of Russia's missiles still reaching their target. But obviously the situation for Ukraine is much, much worse than that, because these missiles do not have a 100% intercept rate. And according to whatever source you hear, even though the US may be canceling or delaying orders to certain countries, other countries are still going to get their Patriot missiles. So the 550 that they're actually making each year, not all 550 missiles will be going to Ukraine. The other problem Ukraine has is they do not have enough launchers to utilize all of these missiles, even if they were getting them all. The systems are spread out, and if Russia is saturating air defense in one particular area, Ukraine cannot use its Patriot missile systems in other areas to help carry the burden of that attack. And so you could see how futile and how desperate this move is. It is, at best, going to buy time, but buy time to do what? And as I pointed out many times before, this is not about defending Ukraine or Ukraine winning. It's about raising the cost for Russia as high as possible. That is all the US is attempting to do. Let's get back to this Associated Press article here about Ukraine employing this flexible defense, which looks a lot like Ukraine is just losing territory. This is what it says. The first deputy minister of defense of Ukraine said that to neutralize Russian air power, Ukraine needs at least 130 F-16 fighter jets, some of which he expects to arrive later this year and early next. The problem is Ukraine doesn't even have enough pilots to send to be trained to fly that many F-16s. That is the first problem. The second problem is I have not heard anything about sending Ukraine 130 F-16 fighter jets. And even if 130 fighter jets are sent to Ukraine, they're not going to be able to be sent all at once. So by the time the 130th F-16 arrives in Ukraine, Ukraine will already be well underway to losing the F-16s that have already been sent. And this has been the case with absolutely all of the weapon systems the collective West has sent to Ukraine. They're not building a critical mass in terms of fighting capacity. It is being fed into Ukraine, and it is being destroyed faster than it could be replaced. The largest number of F-16s that I've heard so far is 85, most of which will be sitting in Romania, stored, and then sent incrementally as Ukrainian pilots and their F-16s are shot down, damaged, destroyed on the ground and over the battlefield. Then AP says, the new arrivals have improved the unit's stock. So they're talking about artillery shells by 75% compared to last winter, when supplies were so low that the military had no choice but to give ground to save soldiers' lives, he said. But they aren't nearly enough to hold off Russia's advances and often aren't the large calibers that are most needed. We need 4 times this amount to operate without counting each shell and prioritizing what to hit. Except there aren't 4 times more artillery shells of any caliber to send to Ukraine. There aren't enough artillery pieces to fire 4 times more artillery shells. Then AP admits Alexander, a deputy battalion commander for the 47th Brigade, who spoke on the condition that only his first name be used, in line with his unit's protocol, said the brigade needs more anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles. And I already did a whole video recently all about this, how, again, the West is sending what they can spare of monthly production to Ukraine. Even if they sent all of their monthly production to Ukraine, it is not enough to change what is happening on the battlefield. Russia is literally making more armored vehicles than the collective West makes advanced anti-tank missiles to destroy them. Then it says, we can't take all the ammunition our partners give us at once. We receive it in portions, and right now we can't accumulate what we need. So that is exactly what I was just talking about in terms of building toward a critical mass in terms of fighting capacity. They simply cannot do it because the collective West doesn't make enough to do that. They're not even making enough to replace what is being lost. And then AP cites a Western military analyst. This is what they say. Ukraine's elastic band strategy. Ukraine has deployed an elastic defense strategy to buy time until it's better armed and provisioned. By making painful choices to pull back to better defended positions, Ukrainian troops are able to fight more effectively and save personnel, military officials said. Time is in the favor of Ukraine. And plus, the rationale of an elastic band, you can cede a little territory and gain a little time. And then by the end of this year, Ukraine will have advantages that it has never had before. And this is some analyst with the military intelligence think tank IHS Janes. They never explain what those advantages are going to be, and I have not heard anyone even discuss this. Even the most fanatical pro-Ukrainian supporters cannot really explain coherently what those advantages might be. Although I have heard some people claim that Western military industrial production is vastly expanding. There's going to be factories in Ukraine. I'm going to talk about factories in Ukraine here in just a moment. I'm going to burst that bubble for people as well. But let's continue with AP. Russia now has about 650,000 troops in Ukraine, which is nearly 5 times the 140,000 it had there 2 years ago. So we always hear about this Western narrative about a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. But now we see there are 5 times more troops in Ukraine now. So I guess it's a fuller scale invasion. And then AP complains, Russian tactical changes have proven effective, sending waves of soldiers from different directions to force Ukrainian forces to expend more shells, attacking more frequently at night to exploit Ukraine's weaknesses and inability to effectively counterattack, and even having soldiers don blue-striped Ukrainian helmets to confuse enemy drone operators. Dense Russian signal jamming along the front line has reduced the effectiveness of Ukrainian strike drones, Ukrainian commanders said, blaming superior Russian capabilities, but also poor communication between Ukrainian electronic warfare and drone units. All of these things that I have been talking about for months, if not years. Now, AP is admitting all of it. What about logistics? Russia's improved targeting of Ukrainian supply routes is having its intended effect, Ukrainian commanders said. Remember how HIMARS and ATACMS and all of these other wonder weapons sent to Ukraine, they were going to strike at the heart of Russian logistics and isolate Russian forces all across the line of contact, and Crimea most of all. And we have not seen that materialize in any shape, form, or way. Instead, it turns out that it's Russia doing this to Ukraine. They understand that we are supplied with new aid, and they have increased their drone strikes, and it influences our logistics. This is a soldier with the 28th Brigade in Bakhmut. He's not in Bakhmut because Russia controls Bakhmut, so I guess he's near Bakhmut, who spoke using his call sign per his unit's policy. His call sign is Ninja. Now the delivery is significantly complicated. We are forced to use drones, said Alexander. If before armored vehicles would deliver ammunition 2 or 3 times a day, now they generally do so only once a day. So we're waiting for all of these arms and ammunition to reach the front line, but they're admitting that their logistics are being pressed harder now than ever, and it can't reach the front lines. And then this is how the article ends. This is a couple of paragraphs, but it gives you full context here. Improved Russian targeting is also exacting a heavy toll in Ukrainian blood, especially during the fragile hours between troop rotations. Russia has become more adept at striking during these windows, when defensive lines are at their weakest, commanders said. One unit in the Chasiv Yar area said a quarter of its casualties happened while transporting troops to and from frontline positions. Tor, the commander of a unit in Chasiv Yar, said Russia's ever-present drones have made it impossible to mask especially large troop movements. All day and all night, they are flying in the sky and observing us. It's impossible to move without being seen, he said. Tor, who goes by his call sign in keeping with his unit's protocols, said his soldiers have nowhere to hide and change positions because of constant Russian bombardment. Often they have to run half a kilometer or more in the open air to find cover. When you're in a basement, you're safe. The minute you come up, you become an easy target, he said. And that is in line with all of the information that I've been sharing, again, for months, if not years, of the disparity in terms of material support both sides are receiving. The Russian forces on the front line are receiving many times more drones of many more variety to use against Ukrainian forces than Ukraine is either producing themselves or receiving and using. And then when you add in the effects of Russian electronic warfare, the number of Ukrainian drones that they actually have on hand and the number that carry out effective strikes, the number of effective strikes is much lower than the total number of drones they have. So I often hear people saying, Ukraine is making 5,000 FPV drones a month or a day or whatever the number is, and you're ignoring the fact that FPV drones don't always hit their targets, even under ideal conditions. They don't always hit their target. They don't always destroy their target. And then adding in the dimension of electronic warfare, sometimes they don't even come anywhere close to reaching their target. Their signal is disrupted. They'll fall out of the air. They'll even be commandeered by Russian operators. And that is the reality of what's going on the battlefield. And now Associated Press is telling you this. Again, I'm only citing Western sources while laying out this analysis. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into this notion of waiting for additional Western aid. And as I mentioned before, this idea that Western military industrial production is ramping up, and there's also going to be vast networks of industrial production inside Ukraine itself, which does not even make sense at face value, because any sort of large facility constructed or placed inside an existing factory is going to be found and then destroyed by Russian forces. Let's look at this article, though. Ribbon cutting. So the first factory has already been made. Let's take a look. Kiev Independent, this is June 22nd, 2024. First Rheinmetall Ukraine joint production and repair plant becomes operational. I can't really, there's the ribbon, they're cutting the ribbon. And we see one vehicle in the background. We see this heavy duty hoist here, but not much else. Let's see what the article says. The first joint production plant of the German arms manufacturer Rheinmetall and Ukrainian state-owned enterprises in Ukraine became operational. Strategic Industries Minister announced on June 10th. The news came as Kiev aims to localize weapons production in 2024. Rheinmetall previously said it plans to open at least 4 production plants in Ukraine. So here's the first one. And as I paint a clearer picture of what this facility actually is, you will realize what all of this adds up to in reality. The facility will enable faster repair of foreign supplied equipment and their subsequent return to the front line. In the future, the plant will also produce new armored vehicles, according to the minister. The location of the plant was not disclosed, presumably due to security concerns, of course, because it'll be immediately targeted and destroyed by Russia. This is why Ukraine has really had no military industrial capacity within Ukraine to speak of, except very small shops distributed across Ukraine making things like FPV drones, which can produce a lot of drones. That's true. But Russia also has distributed networks making FPV drones. They also have factories, entire factories producing FPV drones, which is why they have so many more in the air at any given time than Ukraine does. And that is the advantage Russia has and will always have over Ukraine. When will this repair facility that will eventually become a manufacturing plant, when is it going to start producing vehicles? How many vehicles? What kind of vehicles? So they cite another article from Kiev Independent. This one is from December 2023. Rheinmetall aims to start production of armored vehicles in Ukraine in 2024. I haven't heard any update since then. So is this plan even still on track to begin producing entire vehicles at this plant or any other plant by the end of this year? I don't think so. I really don't think so. So it says the first Lynx armored vehicles, fighting vehicles, could be built in Ukraine by 2025. So not 2024, or 12 to 13 months after signing the contract, according to the CAO. The first 10 Lynx vehicles are currently being manufactured in Germany and Hungary. But after a ramp-up phase, we should then quickly be in a position to produce a significant number of these vehicles entirely in Ukraine. They said they're not concerned about security of factories in Ukraine, as Rheinmetall will be renting existing plants, converting them, and then operating them, and they seem to be quite well protected. Now, in previous updates, citing entirely Western sources, I have cited that Russia is producing new or refurbished tanks at a rate of 125 per month. Overall, there's between 200 and 300 armored vehicles of all kinds being manufactured every single month in Russia. They're talking about 10 vehicles being made right now for Ukraine, and then they're going to be making vehicles in Ukraine after they ramp up production. But let's see if we can find a little bit more information about this facility that they just opened. It turns out that Bild, a German newspaper, went on a tour of the facility, and they included pictures of it. So let's take a look at Bild. This is all in German, but if you have a translation function, you can do that in your browser. It's saying Bild is in this secret tank factory, and then down here it's talking about the repair hall being a strategic target of Russia. It is not a factory. It is admittedly not a factory. You can see with your eyes that it's not a factory. It is the equivalent of a small field repair shop that both sides have many of closer to the line of contact. This one maybe has Rheinmetall staff or technicians working on these vehicles, so they want it much further away from the line of contact, and it's small to avoid being immediately targeted and destroyed by Russia. It's not going to be a strategic target because a facility this small, and I'm going to get into how big it is, a facility this small is going to make absolutely no difference. The number of armored vehicles the West has sent to Ukraine clearly has not had a strategic impact. A facility repairing what's left of these vehicles and being this small is going to have no impact strategically on the fighting in this conflict. So let's look. In this picture, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4 infantry fighting vehicles, modern infantry fighting vehicles, 4 of them. And you can see there's a Rheinmetall stamp here on the front, and we see this R here. Keep that in mind. There's a rolling shutter back there, and there's this heavy duty hoist right there. So those are your points of reference. In this picture, he's standing in front of the modder in front of the hoist. So it would be this one right here with the Rheinmetall stamp on it. And then here, this is the one with the R on it. Okay, so they're just standing next to that one. And then here is a Leopard 1 tank, a completely useless piece of equipment that is less capable than the Leopard 2s that were sent and ended up burning on the battlefield. And that looks like it's about it. That looks like that is about it for this facility. And I'm going to be generous and say there's 5 vehicles in total that you can see in these photos. I'm going to be generous and say that it's mirrored on the other side of where the camera was taking these pictures. So there might be up to 10. I'm going to be generous and say there's up to 10 vehicles sitting in this facility at any one time being repaired. I don't know how you go from this to a production facility. That simply is not going to happen. Not here, not at this facility. Again, 5 to 10 vehicles, that is what you will see in a field repair shop closer to the line of contact on both sides. Both sides have them. Ukraine has them. They know how to repair and maintain their Soviet-era equipment. They had facilities like this along the line of contact, behind the line of contact, but relatively close so that the vehicles can be repaired and returned to action quickly. A facility like this, we don't really know where it is. People are assuming that it's in Western Ukraine. Other facilities are located in Poland. That's over 1,000 kilometers away from the line of contact. So a vehicle is damaged, has to be recovered, transported 1,000 kilometers to Poland and 1,000 kilometers back to the front line. I would imagine that it's a somewhat long journey for these vehicles as well. These German vehicles that have been performing utterly horribly on the battlefield throughout their duration in the conflict. One single field repair shop dressed up as a production facility is not going to change the course of the fighting, even if you had 4 of these, as Rheinmetall plans to open in Ukraine. It's not going to make any difference. This is not strategic, it's not tactical, it's political. It's meant as a sign of support, as a substitute for actual real support that might actually help Ukraine turn the tide of the conflict. What we're seeing is facilities being funded by European, American, Ukrainian taxpayers' money. So they have these contracts. The companies are more than happy to open a facility like this, even though it's going to be completely useless. They're more than happy to open 1, 4, 40 of them. As long as they have money, they're going to open these facilities. It reminds me a lot of Afghanistan, the 20-year US occupation of Afghanistan. On paper, all of the programs, infrastructure projects, plans for the education system, everything, absolutely everything, building up the economy, the armed forces of Afghanistan. Looking at it on paper, it looked like the US was going to turn it into the 51st state of America. But in reality, the contractors involved were doing this purely for profit. They didn't care about properly building the project. They did the bare minimum. Many even defrauded the US government to just maximize the amount of money that went into their pocket versus what went into the projects. As soon as the projects were done, they were out. They didn't care what happened to them. As a matter of fact, if they fell into disrepair or were destroyed, it's even better for them because then they can come back, get another fat contract, and do this whole process all over again. We remember when the US finally withdrew from Afghanistan, all of these projects that they were working on, channeling billions and billions and billions of dollars into, evaporated almost overnight, almost literally overnight. All of these projects evaporated, disappeared. So then when we see something like this from Breaking Defense, Northrop planning to build munitions inside Ukraine. This is June 18th, 2024. Northrop's co-production agreement is the first publicly acknowledged deal between a US defense prime and the Ukrainian government for a manufacturing project inside Ukraine. They plan to produce medium caliber ammunition inside Ukraine under a project bankrolled by Ukrainian dollars. But when they say Ukrainian dollars, they mean US and European dollars. That's what they mean. And then it says, we are looking to expand that into tank ammo, 155 millimeter, others as we find innovative processes, the director of international business for Northrop's defense system sector said. So this is a scam. They're not even making these medium caliber rounds yet, and their plans to make things that Ukraine actually desperately needs are in the future after they create this facility. If they create this facility, they're certainly getting the money to do it, but will they actually make it, and will it do what they advertise it as being designed to do? That is a totally different question. And when we look at ammunition production in the West itself, these companies are incapable of sufficiently expanding production, even under ideal conditions in the West where they have existing facilities already making this ammunition. How are they going to significantly increase the production of ammunition and weapons inside Ukraine, inside a war zone, where any facility of any size capable of making sufficient numbers of ammunition and arms is going to be immediately targeted by Russia and destroyed? This is not Western support that is on its way, that is going to significantly change the situation on the ground in Ukraine. This is a substitute for that aid. The West is simply incapable of lending to Ukraine. They simply are incapable of doing it. They're doing this as a substitute for actually sending the aid Ukraine needs. Looking at the Rheinmetall facility, that is not a factory. It is not even a significant maintenance facility. It is a field workshop dressed up as a serious, significant maintenance facility and even potential production site. It is not what they are saying it is, and this is an empty gesture as a substitute for the aid that Ukraine actually needs, that everyone admits it needs but is not getting. So that's where we are. That's where the narrative is. They're claiming that this aid is on its way. Just keep on fighting. It'll get there soon. It's not coming because it doesn't exist, and it will not exist. And the projects that they are investing in and working on are projects like this that have no meaning, no relevant strategic meaning to the fighting on the ground in Ukraine. I want to go over one more article because I was talking about this in previous updates, this plan of isolating Crimea by somehow cutting the land bridge, which Ukraine already tried and failed to do, hitting a single port out of several major ports along the Crimean coast, and then obviously cutting the Crimean bridge itself. Here's, again, from the Kiev Independent: destruction of Kerch Bridge won't be as effective anymore, military says. Ukrainian military is saying this. Is hardly ever used for military logistics. Hitting it would simply be symbolic. It would be symbolic. It would be a great PR stunt, but it is not going to sever logistics to Crimea, as I have been saying all along. Russia maintained the military and civilian needs of Crimea from 2014 to 2018, when this bridge was finally completed. And that was long before the land bridge was established in 2022. And I have often said that Russia maintains significant military operations in Syria through military, airlift, and sea lift capabilities. And the Crimea is much closer to the rest of Russia than Syria is, and they would be able to maintain at a minimum the functioning of its military forces on Crimea. So again, this is a substitute for a strategy, a theory of victory that simply does not exist. I will continue keeping an eye on all developments regarding this proxy war the US is fighting against Russia in Ukraine. I have articles and also videos coming out soon about a similar process the US is pursuing against China through the Chinese island province of Taiwan. A very similar scenario being set up. The US suffering from all of the deficiencies it suffers from in its proxy war with Russia. It's amplified at a much larger level because China is just so much larger, and the strategic lay of the potential battlefield is tilted so much more in favor of China. But I'll get into that later. Until then, if you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. I highly suggest people follow me on Telegram. I post absolutely everything there, including backups of my videos. If you don't want to watch my videos on YouTube, that's understandable. You can watch all of my videos in full on Telegram. I also post articles on Telegram that I am unable to link to on X for some reason. It is still being censored on X. Also in the video description are the links to every single article that I referenced in this video and then some. Also in the video description are ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel or any of the other social media platforms I'm on. If ads pop up, feel free to skip past them because they're not helping me out at all. If you do want to help support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also through Patreon. To everyone who has been helping out, whether it's a one-time donation, donations month to month, or even if you have no extra resources to spare and you're just helping share my work with others, that is all greatly appreciated. That is what makes this work possible. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.